Hello, folks, and welcome to a new edition of Living Word Live. We're so glad that you're able to join us for this new transmission. We are approximating the end of 2023, and just like you were commenting recently, and I know it's not only been to myself, but to other people, it seems as if this year has flown necessarily.
That's the way it seems to me, but then when I mention that, some people tend to say, that's because you're old.
Well, I don't quite understand that because I'm turning 40, and it seemed to me like this year flew.
Well, when you're young, you get desperate for time to move. I want my license. I want to go out. I want independence. And so it seems like time doesn't move. I guess when you hit your 40s, 50s, 60s, you go like, wait a minute.
Is time accelerating all of a sudden? Or?
Warp speed here. Beam me up, Scotty.
Once again, we want to thank the audience for watching this transmission. As we had promised the audience on Sunday, we posted a video on Saturday because our last live meeting was on Saturday and not on Sunday. By the way, just to let everybody know, because some people think that maybe there's going to be a breakage in the pattern in this weekend. No, we're going live again back to Sunday, this Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, unless something strange happens, it's every other Sunday.
Exactly.
Whether it's for the face-to-face or live or the the webcast.
Exactly. Some will ask, but why did you meet in person last Saturday? We explained that we are firm believers in what the Bible says, that first we have to be ministers in our home. Absolutely. And that's why we said, let's do it on Saturday so that every family can spend it with their family members, as it were, on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, we were not going to pass up the opportunity for a couple of good meals.
Absolutely.
At least two.
Exactly, exactly. And just to let everybody also know, we are on pace, as it were, to debut the new website, which will host all of the new podcasts that we will have turned over, as it were, and published in the new year. So we ask you to stay alert by subscribing to our Telegram channel. You'll find that the username is on the bottom of the screen. There's also a link in the description below. If you have not subscribed to our Telegram channel, please do so that you would be alerted as to what the names of those podcasts will be. I do know so far that we have two to the point. That'll be the ladies and the ladies podcast. That'll debut next week. We have honed in at a couple of names. We're still working that out behind the scenes, but I also know that I will have a podcast on a weekly basis with my wife. We've debuted it before, called The Honorable Family, and that will be made available also through the new website. So again, the listings and all those things pertinent to that will be made available in the next few days. But to the task at hand, we want to talk about defining specifically what is the fear of the Lord.
Yeah, there's a couple of obstacles we need to get out of the way before we can have a proper understanding of what the fear of the Lord exactly is. So let's use for a catapult Psalms 111, the 111th Psalm, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So if you don't know what the fear of the Lord is, if you know what the fear of the Lord is and you're not walking in it, you're not even in the beginning of wisdom. So I think it's a good starting point. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, what are these obstacles that we need to bring down? When people hear the word fear, that's it. Automatically they go, fear of the Lord. This has to mean that we must be afraid of God. That's not what it means at all. Of course, the people that are quick to think and to believe and to teach that words only have one meaning, I think they know they're not correct in that. Nevertheless, that's what they push, because you can take one word in our country and it means this. You take it to England, it means something else. Another place, it means something else. So it's not like Led Zeppelin said, that sometimes words have two meanings. I'm just talking about the way people use the word. For example, tonight, if time permits, we will be talking about walking. And for most people, they'll take that literally and they'll say, yeah, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. But in reality, when the Bible talks about walking, it's talking about fellowship.
Sure.
It's talking about conduct. And so we need to be careful with that, because once again, when they hear the word fear, automatically they go, it has to mean that I must be afraid of the Lord. Furthermore, to throw some wood on the fire, they'll use Matthew 10:28, and that says, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul." Rather be afraid. There it is. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. And so they go, well, there it is. It's plain. That's really talking about me being afraid of God. Well, no. Matthew 10:28 is talking about persecution.
Sure.
And so it has nothing really to do with the fear of the Lord as it is explained and detailed, mostly in the book of Psalms and in Proverbs. So maybe we can get a little bit into that as to why it appears so much in Psalms and in the book of Proverbs. But anyway, we need to get that out of the way. That's the first obstacle that we have to bring down. We're not talking about being scared of God. We're talking about a respect, a reverence, yes, absolutely. But also, we will be talking about how to behave, how to conduct your affairs. It's a matter of my walk with God. If I walk this way, the way that the fear of the Lord teaches me, then I will receive many blessings. And we'll quote some verses tonight that will show how many blessings are available. They're there for the taking, really, if you learn to walk in the fear of the Lord. So the first obstacle, and we're going to push that one out of the way immediately, we are not talking about being afraid of God.
So when we talk about fear of the Lord, the definition that needs to be applied to that particular text and everything that sprouts from it is more than this reductionist, simplistic understanding, which, again, doesn't even actually touch on what the Bible, the entirety of what the Bible has to say with respect to the fear of the Lord. You mentioned a few of them: reverence, respect. That's an all-encompassing. In other words, fear of the Lord is an all-encompassing definition that has many different facets to it. It's not just, as you said, it's not just this reductionist idea where I just have to be afraid of God.
Right. And for me, if I'm obligated, if I'm pushed to a simpler explanation, I would say that fear of the Lord regulates my conduct.
Exactly.
This is why I started to explain.
So it's an ethic. It's an ethic.
Yes, in a way. This is why I started to explain that you can use the word walk, and for most people that are not used to applying biblical interpretation to the Bible, their hermeneutics is not quite there. They go, well, that means left foot first, right foot right after that, left, right. No, it's talking about fellowship. It's talking about behavior. It's talking about conduct. So once we get that straightened out, then we can see that the fear of the Lord is not talking about being scared of God. So we bring down that obstacle.
Let me ask you a question. How much of this lack of understanding over this concept, again, biblical in nature, has to do with the unfortunate phenomenon? And it is this: we tend to apply our own secular definitions, or the things that we've adopted from the world, into the Bible instead of letting the Bible define these parameters for us.
We impose it on the Bible. You must detox from that. If you don't, then whatever you picked up from your parents and school and television and God knows what, you will apply it to the Bible, and you're going to create a mess for yourself.
A vivid example of this, for maybe some of the audience who would be asking, well, give me an example of this. Jesus himself feared God. Some will balk at that, and they'll even choke, saying, wait a minute, if Jesus is God, wait a minute. If we look at the testimony of Christ himself, he says that he is the Father. The disciples asked him, show us the Father and it would be sufficient. And he said, all this time I've been with you, and yet you do not recognize me. In other words, what Jesus was saying, metaphorically so, is that I am, as it were, the spitting image, if we want to use that phrase.
Right.
Paul said that he was the express image of the Father. In other words, he and the Father are one. And yet in his walk, as in his first coming, he made himself, as it were, a servant, as it says in Philippians. The way that Jesus conducted himself is the very image of the fear of God, the reverence with which he expressed towards the Father, the respect, the submission, all of these things. So that's part of what you're mentioning. That
Hebrews 5:7 mentions that his prayers were heard, attended to, because he presented his prayers in the fear of God, in the fear of the Lord. So this is the second hindrance that we need to bring down. And it's precisely the fact that people will say, well, no, the fear of the Lord is of the Old Testament. You can't use that. We don't practice that. We don't go by that in the New Testament, because walking in faith, walking by faith, has replaced that. So we're going to use some verses here to prove that, no, it's still in operation in the New Testament. For example, Hebrews 5:7 teaches us that Jesus walked and prayed in the fear of the Lord. And this is something that you will find in Hebrews 5:7. He was heard because of his reverent fear. It doesn't mean that he was afraid of the Father, that the Father is going to smite him, kill him, eliminate him. It's a reverent fear.
But that, I don't know if we can pause for a quick second, because that's an important distinction to make. And one of the reasons that many Christians unfortunately read into this particular text that we mentioned earlier, and in Proverbs as well, the fear of the Lord, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, and they automatically read into that afraid, is because that's what religion tends to do. And this is
True.
Target number one for us. You've said it over and over again. What is it that Catholicism, for example, typically teaches about God the Father? Unless you submit. Of course, it fits in with the Catholic creeds because they want you to live in a state of fear so that you won't question any of their doctrines or their ideas or their impositions on you. Yep. That's part of the religious makeup. It's a manipulation. But let's face it, a lot of so-called Christian leaders and churches, they also tap into that very thing so that they can manipulate people, and it's actually very advantageous for them, if you look at it from that perspective, to teach that if you question somehow the authority, and I'm the authority of God, he will smite you. It's advantageous for religion to advance that very narrative.
Agreed. So, once again, the second obstacle that we have to bring down, it has to collapse, is the one that says, no, this is not New Testament material, therefore I will not pay any attention to this. Well, Paul says that the fear of the Lord is something that you need to perfect sanctification.
Yep.
You know how many people have issues with consecration and walking in a godly manner? Well, listen to this, 2 Corinthians 7:1. Having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of the Lord. Yeah. So now we have two verses from the New Testament that clearly tell us that it is there and is something we should honor, and this should regulate our walk. And by now, some people are saying, well, please go on and explain the fear of the Lord. In a moment, it's important that we bring down these obstacles, because if you share this with other believers, they'll tell you, no, that's been done away with. Now I walk in fear, in faith. Now I move in faith. So don't talk to me about the fear of the Lord. That's Old Testament stuff. I don't care to hear about it. And so we have two verses already that prove that it is here. It is part of the New Testament. And there's more. I'm going to quote a third one, because the Bible says that everything should stand by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses.
Which,
right?
By the way, to add to what you've just stated, if you begin to ask the question, necessarily, how do I begin to practice the fear of the Lord? Paul's already giving you an indication into that when he says, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness. That's part of, as it were, of an expression of the fear of the Lord. You do it, why? Out of reverence, out of respect. He saved me. The least that I can do is, like he says in Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, it's a reasonable service.
Yes.
These are the things that we end up doing.
And the word is strong, perfecting. Perfecting holiness in the fear of the Lord. One more, Ephesians 5:21. Ephesians 5:21, and this one has to deal with brotherly submission. The Bible clearly calls us to submit to one another.
Sure.
Typically, when we talk about submission, we usually tell the ladies, you must submit to your husbands. But this verse teaches something that is very important, that is brotherly submission.
Sure.
I may not like what my brother is telling me or asking me to do, but if it's biblical, if it's in love, then I should be able to submit to that. Yeah. I submit to no one. Fine, that's a nice way to express your rebellious spirit.
This is the same guy that pays taxes even though he doesn't submit to anybody, right?
Exactly. Submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. So once again, we have confirmation that this is part of the New Testament and that we should walk in the fear of the Lord. So we can get into arguments and our own definitions about the fear of the Lord, but why not let the Bible speak for itself? And for that, we turn to the 34th Psalm, and we're going to start reading in verse 11. Come, ye children, hearken unto me, I will teach you the fear of the Lord. So David is saying what? Sit down. Yeah. I'm going to teach you what the fear of the Lord is.
And this is very interesting because from the very onset, this is very different than fear, because fear drives you away, so to speak. It drives you away from that. And here we have David saying, no, this is something that actually attracts you, so
draws
to speak.
You now, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because when Adam sinned, what did he do?
He ran away. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So verse 12, What man is he that desires life? Well, I want life.
Sure.
I want as much life as I can get, right? That's why Christians boast about, I have abundant life. Well, good for you.
What does that even mean?
Exactly. So what man is he that desires life and loves many days? Well, I want many days, that he may see good.
That's
Well,
interesting.
I want life. I want many days so I can see good. I want to see my kids. I want to see my grandkids. I want to see them developed and going forth and serving God. I want to see all these things.
That's an important distinction, because there are people whom think that that's what they want to live life for, when in fact they just want to give free rein, as it were, to the capricious fleshly desires. That's not what David writes here.
But it's interesting that you go there for a moment, because the Bible teaches, and we'll get there if the time allows, that in the fear of the Lord, those that walk in the fear of the Lord will find honor and riches and wisdom.
And glory is one of the things that Paul
And
mentions
glory.
also, right?
So it's there, it's available to you, it's there for the taking. But if you don't know what the fear of the Lord is, then how can you walk in the fear of the Lord?
Exactly.
And here it is. In reality, it's very simple, or the explanation is walking in this very simple concept. That's another story. Why? Because of the flesh.
Sure.
The flesh is going to oppose itself to the following. Keep thy tongue from evil.
Step number one.
Well, James says if you can manage that, then you've managed maturity.
The way he describes the tongue, he talks, it basically, I think he uses the phrase an inferno. It starts an inferno.
Oh, I'll take a vote of silence. That's not really going to help, because the tongue doesn't speak for itself. It speaks from the content of the heart.
Vote of silence.
Right? Yeah, I will never speak again, right? And even if somebody were to rip your tongue out, your heart still has issues, right?
You know, you just reminded me, there's an episode of The Twilight Zone where these two supposedly rich men engage. I'm pretty sure you remember, they engage in a wager, because one of them, he's very verbose, very arrogant. He speaks about all of the business deals that he has. And then this other guy, he gets tired of listening to him talk. He says, look, I'll engage in a bet with you. If you can keep quiet for 6 months, I'm going to turn over this amount of money. And it was a huge sum of money. He says, deal. The guy doesn't think he's going to go through with it. He actually ends up, exactly. He ends up winning the bet. Lo and behold, it turns out that the one that wagered the money, he didn't have the money because he didn't think it was going to come through. But then the guy that stayed silent cheated because he had his tonsils ripped out. He had his vocal cords ripped out. It's very funny.
Keep thy tongue from evil. Number 2, and thy lips from speaking guile. So this is typical of Proverbs and also in the Psalms, where you state an idea and then you strengthen it by repeating it in other words.
Sure.
Something like that, right? So you have to control your speech. Number 2, or 3 if you want to count it this other way.
Does that also play into what Jesus said, where he said that man shall give an account for every, I think it was lazy word. Is that the phrase that I think he uses in English? Man will give an account for every lazy word that he speaks, vain word.
Yeah, because when you consider the original word there, it's like a bubble. There's nothing in there. No good purpose.
Vanity.
Right. No good purpose is brought from it. Okay, keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile. Depart from evil. So it's not only I will not speak evil, I'm going to get myself away from evil. Depart from evil and do good. So it's not enough for me to say, hey, I'm not going to do evil anymore. No, now on top of that, it tells you do the right thing.
Sure.
Do the right thing. Seek peace and pursue it. So you mean to tell me if I do these things, I will be walking in the fear of the Lord? Well, let's read it again. Come ye children, hearken unto me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord.
But it has to be more complicated.
And that's the point. That's what I'm driving at. No, it has to be more complicated. There has to be something more in depth. You guys are really not getting into the meat of the topic. Why do you want to complicate it? So, come ye children, hearken unto me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is he that desires life? So here's the reason why one would want to walk this way, right? What man is he that desires life, present, and loves many days, present, that he may see good? I want all these things. Sure. Well, keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Now, somebody says, yeah, it's still, it's still Old Testament. Yeah, you gave me 3 verses, but I don't know. Well, First Peter chapter 3, verses 10 and 11 almost repeats.
It's almost as if Peter, shall we say it, plagiarized just a little bit.
Just a
He
little bit.
plagiarized David just a little bit.
Just a little bit. And so how does that read? For he that will love life and see good days, let him retain his tongue from evil and his lips that they speak no guile.
Peter wasn't the president of Harvard, was he?
No. No. Claudine Gay.
Inside joke.
Let him eschew evil and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it. So that's 1 Peter 3, 10, and 11. And let's go through some of these verses that I was mentioning that have these great promises and show us how many really valuable and important things are available to us if we walk in the fear of the Lord. Proverbs 8:13, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. So we see that there's no discrepancy.
Yeah.
It's not just I won't speak evil, I'm going to really detest evil. I can't hate anything. You know, I'm supposed to love her, so go ahead and love evil. Because that's another thing that Christians tend to do. They take a commandment, a teaching of Christ, and they take it to places where you go, like, the Lord never meant to take it there. I can't hate evil. Why not?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with evil? Be indifferent about it? You're going to love evil?
It's like the joke I just launched. Some will say, you're attacking the veracity of the Bible. No, I'm just making a simple observation and making a joke out of it because it's obvious that Peter understood what David wrote in the Psalms. He said it's important to reiterate it.
It's like if I were to sit here and say, you know, I think it's a good thing if we hate cancer. Nobody would have a problem with that.
Nobody would have a problem with that.
Yeah, we have to eradicate cancer. Down with cancer, down with cancer. So now I say we have to hate evil. They go, no, wait a minute, I can't hate evil. I got to love all things. I walk in love. God is love, so God loves evil. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. So you have a little more definition there. Proverbs 10:27. The fear of the Lord prolongs days. The fear of the Lord prolongs days. What does that mean?
There's a lot to be unpacked there because, for example, I think one way to interpret that text in particular is God gives you wisdom on how to live life, and that's one way to prolong your days.
And if you walk in such a manner that it pleases God, his protection is over you.
Exactly.
Whereas if you step outside of his protection, well, God is going to protect me no matter what because he's promised to protect me and he's going to protect me. He's my protector and I'm going to be protected. But that's a lot of protection.
That is a lot of protection. Even ADT doesn't offer that amount of protection. Wait, we might have to cancel that one because they might put a strike on us for that one. But the fact of the matter is that the question, based on what you just said, we would have to ask then, logically speaking, then what responsibility do you have towards God if he's going to offer you this protection? Some will say, well, that's necessarily presenting it as a tit for tat. No, that is a consequence of being obedient, as it were. And if you're going to willingly disobey God, then why is he under any obligation to extend protection to a person who's being willingly disobedient?
Look, I'm not going to get into it tonight, but there are plenty of Bible verses that if you read them carefully, you can see the other side of this verse, and that is your days will be shortened.
Sure.
Why? Well, go ahead and involve yourself in sin.
Exactly.
And continue to walk in the flesh and do the things that, you know, even science, medicine, reason tells you, if I continue to do this, I'm going to shorten my life by a decade or two, right?
Sure.
So if you walk properly, if your walk is pleasing unto God, why wouldn't your days be prolonged?
Yep.
All right, we move on. Proverbs 14:26. In the fear of the Lord is strong confidence. And you were talking about this on Sunday. Yeah. You want to move confidently.
Sure.
You want to have a confident walk and mindset and conversation. How do you get this?
The thing is that you won't be able to achieve that unless you're actually walking the way that the Lord would have us walk.
Well, if you have a cowardly heart, how do you deal with it? I confess my way out of that. That's not going to work. But you can bring in God's favor and his grace, and he can transform your heart.
I confess my way out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the fear of the Lord is strong, not just regular confidence, strong confidence. And when do I need strong confidence? In difficult places, in the difficult areas of life, when obstacles come against you, and they... You know, Satan, when he hits to destroy.
Sure.
All we need to do is look at Job. what Jesus himself told Peter and the disciples. Satan went asking for you guys, and he said to the Father, no, don't grant him this. No, it's been granted, but this is what I'm going to do for you. I have prayed so that your faith will withstand, and you'll be strong in faith.
Sure.
So, once again, in the fear of the Lord is strong confidence. Proverbs 16:6, talking about correcting sin, iniquity, mistakes, errors. By mercy and truth, iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil. So once again, we see that all these things are in concert. There is no contradiction.
Sure.
Proverbs chapter 22, verse 4, and we'll end with this one. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. So if you learn how to walk this way, if you walk this way, not like walk this way, talk this way. No, you got to go back to
that kind of walking.
Yeah, you got to go back to the 34th Psalm, verses 11 through 14, and really, I would memorize these. I would, focus in on them and start to practice this. Keep thy tongue from evil. Seems simple enough. Go ahead and try it.
That's an interesting one, because that's a particular topic that can be unpacked to certain degrees. I would say to X amount of degrees, because there's so much to be said for what constitutes evil speech. And that in and of itself is something that some people, as it were, have different views on. I think the Bible is very clear on it. But let me put it this way. A lot of Christians have a tendency to be very permissive in what they say is necessarily acceptable, as it were, acceptable speech. In other words, they give themselves more leeway than they ought to, and they think that they're not necessarily violating this text, when I think that all the opposite is true. I think we need to be more, shall I say, conservative. I don't like using that word in particular, because it has a lot of pejorative connotations by the people that have advanced it. But anyways, I think the audience understands what I mean by that. I think in that respect, one has to be more conservative and leaning in that way than not.
You mentioned something previously, and that is that we tend to throw into whatever verse we're reading, whatever we picked up from our parents and school and television and the movies. And so when we hear this, we go, keep thy tongue from evil. I have to stop cursing. Well, yes, but that's not what the verse is talking about. But it's not limited to that.
Exactly. But even then, when we're talking about that,
how about if I start defaming you?
Exactly.
That's evil talk.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because Christians, again, very peculiar and ironic things. I dare not say that word. But did you hear? So on and so forth.
So the accuser of the brethren is at work through your tongue, and yet you refuse to see this as evil talk.
But then you and I have expressed this before. How is it possible that Christians feel no remorse over defaming a brother, but yet be careful how you say things among sinners, because they could be offended with us?
That's true.
It's these sentiments that are misplaced, as it were, because of erroneous interpretations of what the text says.
So again, if you want all these blessings that are there for you, and we just named a few going through the book of Proverbs, remember to keep these things in mind and in focus and in your heart, and walk this way. Keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile. Depart from evil. So it's not just a matter of saying, I'm not going to talk like this anymore. I'm not going to defame the brother. I'm not going to repeat anything that is typical of Satan. Fine. Depart from it. Get away from it. And on top of that, do the right thing.
Yep.
And do good. Yep. Seek peace. Well, it seems like controversy follows me. I'm not a controversial figure or type, but it just follows me. Wherever I go, just trouble follows. All right, then do the opposite. Seek peace. Become a peacemaker, if you will.
There he goes. Let me follow him.
And pursue it. Because this is what happens. Some people get to this place where they go, wow, I'm finally at peace. And then they'll allow somebody that speaks evil and speaks guile to come in and take it from them.
And it's a rotten fruit, as it were, that can contaminate.
So if you do this, now your behavior, your conduct is regulated by the fear of the Lord. Your walk will be pleasing unto God, and the blessings are going to flow.
There you have it, folks, the transmission for this new edition of Living Word Live. Just a few reminders before we end this transmission. We'd like to remind our audience that it is through the donations that we receive from the very same that we can continue to pump out this content. If it continues to edify you, inform you, and bring you closer to your Savior, we would encourage you to give. It is the way that we can continue to engage and once again with our audience and produce this content. There is a link beneath in the description box below. Click on it, follow the instructions. Beforehand, we thank you for your patronage and also for the economic consideration. Again, our next transmission will be live, and it'll be this Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time through this channel. If you have not subscribed, we know that there are people that are viewing the channel that they have not subscribed. Please do so and click on the notification bell so that you were to be alerted as to when we are going to post new content and also when we go live. As we said, the new year has some exciting updates for our audience. We will debut a new website. We will let you know specifically through our Telegram channel. If you have not subscribed, we would encourage you to do so that you would receive the web address when those podcasts are going to be published. We are planning that all these podcasts were to be made available weekly, and there's a set schedule that we will let our audience know when that will happen. Hopefully we'll have all of these updates for you and in their totality on the next transmission of Living Word Live, so be aware of those. That's all the time we have left for this edition. We thank you so much for viewing this. For my father, Jesus, this has been Gio. Until the next occasion that we meet, may the Lord shine his face upon you.